Hi, this is Sue Jackson of the Book by Book blog, and I'm here today with my 2022 reading wrap-up. Just a quick summary of what I read last year, my top books of the year in each category, and I'll do separate videos for fiction, nonfiction, and a couple of other categories. So let's start with some statistics, some facts and figures. I read a total of 75 books last year. That was a little less than I read last year, but I don't care. This is why I don't set a numerical goal for how many books to read each year, like the Goodreads challenge, because the number doesn't really matter to me. I want to read good books, books that I really enjoy, and last year was definitely a hit for that reason. So it's okay if it's a few less than the year before. In fact, my number's been going down for the last few years, but I think that's because I'm reading more big books, especially during the summer when I host the Big Book Summer Challenge. It used to be I'd just read a few big books during the summer, and now I'm enjoying devoting my whole summer to big books. But for this May coming up, you can join in and only read one big book, so you don't have to do it the way I do. But I've been enjoying that. Okay, so 75 books in total. Of those, 45 were adult fiction and 13 were nonfiction. I think for my nonfiction challenge this year, which is in the blogging world, I think my aim was to read 12 nonfiction books, so I passed that up. 6 of my books of the 75 were young adult or teen. 13 of them were for middle grade readers. Now, here's where the numbers start to overlap. So this doesn't add up to 75, but just bear with me. Of the 75 books, I listened to 29 of them on audio. I really enjoy audiobooks. I've always got an audiobook going in addition to whatever I'm reading in print. And as you can see, it really helps me read a lot more, and it's so enjoyable. I found it interesting that a lot of the books that ended up on my best books of the year list were those that I listened to on audio. I think it's a great way to experience books, especially the really well-done audios. 6 of the books I read were graphic novels or graphic nonfiction. That's a combination of adult and middle grade. I only read 1 short story collection last year, and no poetry. I'm not big on poetry, although I like to try to broaden my horizons and experience some. So I might try to fit a little bit in this year. And I read 7 classics. And again, I do a classics challenge on my blog. It's called Back to the Classics. My goal was to read 6 classics, so I surpassed that with 7. I always take a little look at the types of books I've been reading, the characteristics of them. So of my 75, 38 or 51% were by women authors. That's a little bit less than last year. 45 or 60% were diverse books, either featuring diverse characters or written by diverse authors. Again, I've got a challenge I do on my blog, the Diversity Challenge. This is my best year ever for that one. I also do a Read from My Own Shelves challenge every year called the Mount TBR Challenge. Last year I read 33 books from my own shelves. That's only 44%. The thing is, I don't buy books for myself, so it's kind of amazing that the number is that small. And it is less than I had done in previous years. The year before, it was almost 50% from my own shelves. So that's definitely something I want to do better on this year. I do get a lot of books as gifts, and my exception to buying books for myself is Booktopia, this event that I go to in Vermont in May every year. The books selected for Booktopia are usually new releases, usually by authors I haven't read before. So I get some of those from the library, but I do buy some of those for myself. So generally in like around March and April, I'm reading a lot of Booktopia books, which means not a lot from my own shelves. I also get books out of the library during the year, especially for book group. Whatever my book group chooses to read, I usually get that from the library. I had 0 rereads last year, which is interesting. I do enjoy some rereading. I've got a lot of favorites, and it's always wonderful to revisit some of those. But this year, I didn't do that at all. Authors read more than once in 2022. When I first saw this question, I thought, oh, I didn't have any doubles last year for authors. But then I realized there's 2 authors of whom I read 2 books. Maddie Dalrymple, I really love the Anne Kinnear series, which is unusual for me. I don't read a lot of series, but I read books 3 and 4 in her Anne Kinnear series last year. So Maddie Dalrymple is that author. And I also read 2 books by Emily St. John Mandel. The Glass Hotel, I got this as a gift the previous year and read it in the spring. Absolutely loved it. So I was very excited when Sea of Tranquility came out. My husband also gave that to me as a gift for my birthday this year, and I read it in December. So 2 Emily St. John Mandel books. Other than that, it was all different authors all year. The shortest book I read last year was a History Comics, The National Parks, Preserving America's Wild Places. Wonderful book, by the way. And the longest book I read last year was one of my classics and one of the books I read for Big Book Summer, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. According to Goodreads, which isn't exactly accurate because I don't finish putting all my books on there by the end of the year, and some of the ones that they counted were actually from last year, but it's close enough. They say that my average book length was 347 pages, and that I read a total of 26,380 pages, which is pretty amazing. So now I'm just going to do a quick run through of my best books of the year in a couple of different categories. And as I said, I'll have separate videos for top 10 novels, top 10 nonfiction, etc. My best novel read in 2022 and my best book of the year was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I read a lot of good novels, as you'll see in my upcoming video, but this one just made me feel all the feels. It's funny, it's warm, it's suspenseful, and I mean, it made me laugh out loud, it made me gasp. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. And my husband loved it too. My best nonfiction book last year was The Sun Does Shine by Anthony Ray Hinton. I listened to this one toward the end of the year for Nonfiction November. Nikki on Red Dot Reads had recommended it to me, and it was just as amazing as she said. Just a stunning story, but also beautifully told, heartbreaking, heartwarming. It's both horrifying and inspirational. It's the story of an innocent man being imprisoned for 30 years on death row for a crime he didn't commit. Really powerful nonfiction book. My best memoir read in 2022 was another one I listened to on audio, These Precious Days by Ann Patchett. Since it is a memoir, she reads it herself, so the audio was just wonderful. It was like having your best friend sit there and tell you stories. She covers everything from her childhood to her writing life to life during the pandemic. It made me laugh. It teared me up. It's just a beautiful collection of essays. The best audiobook I listened to last year was The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. She's one of my favorite authors. I love her books. This one, I think, was her best ever. I listened to it on audio back in January, but it really stuck with me. Louise Erdrich's novels are especially good on audio because she reads them herself. And they usually feature Native American characters. And just the cadence of her speech, she just really embodies her characters. They're really special on audio. This book was so good that I gave it to my mom for Christmas, and I hope she's enjoying it now. The best teen young adult book that I read in 2022 was Kent State by Deborah Wiles. I love Deborah Wiles' books. She's got this whole series. This isn't actually part of it. She's got this 60s trilogy that's historical fiction for middle graders. Excellent. This one, though, was written for older teens and young adults. Again, it's historical fiction, obviously about the Kent State shootings. It was the audiobook. This was another one I listened to on audio, which was really special because it's a multi-character audio. And she's got different people who were there at the time, each telling the story from their own perspectives. So college students who knew the kids that were shot, college students that were protesting, one of the soldiers, some of the local people that lived in town. Different perspectives, each in their own voice. I had to keep reminding myself that it was historical fiction because it's just so powerful and moving. I highly recommend this book, particularly on audio. My best middle grade book of the year, this was a tough choice. I'll do another video on my top picks for YA and middle grade. There were a lot of good middle grade books, but Dennis Ever After by Tony Abbott really moved me. I listened to that one toward the end of the year for the RIP challenge. It does involve a ghost, but it's also a mystery. It's a family drama. There's suspense. It really just had it all. So really enjoyed Dennis Ever After. The best graphic novel or nonfiction that I read this year was Booked by Kwame Alexander. This is one I got out of the library. I actually grabbed this one at the last minute off my library shelves with 2 days left in a month where I wanted to meet a monthly challenge that I was doing. And it worked out perfectly. It's a really great book. It's middle grade. It's mostly written in verse, as Kwame Alexander often does. It's a family drama, but also about growing up, about friends. It's very, very clever. The prompt that I was trying to fit for my challenge that month was something that involves wordplay. And this was the perfect choice because from the title through every page, it is very clever, intricate wordplay. It's a lot of fun. So definitely recommend Booked. Finally, the best classic that I read last year was The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury. I'm a huge Bradbury fan from way back. Started reading him when I was in high school. Pretty much read every Bradbury book that my library had at the time. So I've been sort of revisiting him. High school was a long time ago. So this is one that I'm sure I read back in high school, but I didn't remember. It's actually a collection of short stories, but they're kind of related with a framework that pulls the whole thing together, and really enjoyed The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury. So those are my top picks in each of those categories. and watch for some more videos coming up with top 10 novels and other categories. And I'd love to hear what you read last year. What were your top picks of the year? What were the highlights of your reading year? Let me know in the comments down below.